Good evening and welcome to this edition of In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. I'm Eric Marsh, Executive Director of Whitewater Community Television, the host that has been in hiding all year. Want to start by thanking Phil Quinn, who sat in on the first Thursday of the month, Tim Scales, who helped us out last week as guest hosts of In Focus. I appreciate them giving us a little bit of extra time off through the holiday season and sitting in and bringing some interesting conversation to the area. Greatly appreciate what it was that they were able to do for us. Tonight, if I got to come back, I'm going to come back with a bang. We're going 90 minutes and one guest, Mayor Dave Snow, has agreed to sit in with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me back. I always enjoy coming onto In Focus and having these conversations with you.
Cool. You might know that there are people signing up for an office. No, we'll get to that later. So as they sign up, you need to make sure that you're doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing and you're getting registered to vote for them. So voter registration actually is going on now and ends Monday, April 8th. The voter registration office, you've heard this before, but just in case you're new to the area, 301 East Main Street, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. You can also go online and find out more information, indianavoters.com. There's a phone number there, 973-9304, or visit the clerk's office, co.wayne.in.us. Look for the clerk's office, and they will have all of the information that you need about getting registered to vote. We do ask that as many people as possible get signed up, get ready to vote, do your civic duty with this. We've got some potential weather coming in, and just like last weekend, causing some problems, some organizations getting ahead of some things. There was supposed to be a recital series going on with the Richmond Symphony Orchestra and Bethany Theological Seminary. This was the first one of those events that was supposed to take place this Sunday at 4 o'clock. Due to the impending weather, that has been canceled. So the next time is going to be on February 10th, so you might want to mark that one on your calendar. That is a new collaboration between the Richmond Symphony Orchestra and Bethany Theological Seminary. Wanted to pass that on. We've been running that on our bulletin board. Wanted to let you know that that event has been canceled. We're going to take some time, break some things down. One of the reasons the mayor agrees to do 90 minutes is he likes to, as he says, unpack some things.
That's right.
Add a little bit more context, a little bit more information to what's going on. And if my questions will come up, we will be in good shape. I actually wrote some out this time around.
All right.
It goes back and forth. Let's start with some good news. At the last council meeting, Brooks Birtle announced that undeveloped property up the street on Chester Boulevard is about 98, 99% complete.
That's correct.
I think the original numbers were that it would probably be June or July maybe when that was finished, but now it seems like things are well ahead of schedule.
Right.
For those who didn't hear the announcement, I know that you're going to want to talk about that a little bit and let the community know all of that. But if you could go into a couple of other points as you're opening up the suitcase. Sure. There was a conversation at some point that you might try to find some other partners to help pay some of this down. Right now, the payment of the bill for the removal of that property is being split between the City of Richmond, Reed Health, Wayne County government. I thought there might be some additional partners that you were going to go after to see if the taxpayer could take a little bit less of a hit. If you could update us on that. When also would conversation begin in the community about what could be possible on that site, considering the fact that a chunk of that area is in a floodplain and whatever the zoning of that area can or can't be or do. So if you could go into some of those things and bring us up to speed on that, please.
Okay, sure. We did have that exciting news at council from Brooks Birtle, as you said, from TRC, that we have substantial completion on the site. And I love that you called it the undeveloped land on 27. That was something that I brought up at the council meeting. Yeah. It's really time to move away from calling it the former hospital site or any of those titles associated with the hospital. We've moved on. We've taken what was a boat anchor to our city's development, an eyesore, a safety hazard, and we've turned that into an asset. We have an asset on our hands now. And I have to backtrack for a moment because it's really important to continue to reiterate that it's only an asset because of the teamwork of City Council, County Commissioners, Reed Health coming in as partners. And to address that piece of it, you know, as we were navigating through that process, there were so many variables and so many questions. What hiccups are we going to run into along the way? And do we have the finances secured to get all the way through this project and to get to the finish line? And because of the partnership between the city, the county, and Reed Health, we had the financial wherewithal to get through to substantial completion of the project where we are right now. And so that brings us to this point where now, as you drive by that, I've had a lot of phone calls and emails of people saying, you know, I was watching it come down, but now I drive by and it's so stark to just see the hill and to see the tree. And so the fence, we'll see the fence come down in the spring or early summer. There's been seeding and straw laid down, and so the grass has to take hold. And so we do still need to kind of keep people off that, keep it fenced in, because it's not completely finished. It's substantial completion. Most of the heavy machinery has been moved out of there, as you can see. Yeah. So in the spring or summer, we'll see that fence come down. When we look ahead, that's a big conversation. The little baby step that I took towards that was to have just a conversation with a company that specializes in future land use planning, and said, just put together a proposal as how you could help all of us as a community and a team look at the future land use planning of this site. And I wanted to see that proposal and see if that's something that we as a team could engage in and use them as the catalyst to have that conversation. And I finally just got that back earlier this week. I don't know that it's the right plan, but I won't take any forward steps without the team coming back together. This was a team effort to get us this far. So now that I have that and I can see that and I can see those details and say, okay, maybe this is not the right way to navigate the future land use planning. Let's come back as a team, figure this out, utilize some other community organizations perhaps, and begin having this discussion for future land use planning for the site and see what is the right path to go down. I think it's an open-ended question. I mean, what is right for the community in that spot? I do think you made a good point about the floodplain in the back. So the development that we see in the future will probably be out towards 27 a little more. The hospital was very recessed in that area, right. And it was back closer to that flood area. I think the new development you'll see will be out closer to the road with maybe parking on the other side. So before you saw parking in the front and then a hospital, I think you'll see that flipped in the future. But we still have to have a lot of discussions, and we don't want to jump the gun. It is where it is. It's good. It's an asset. It's a tremendous asset, and it's just beautiful to see it all cleaned up. I mean, it's just, I don't know about you, but when I drive by, I just breathe this big sigh of relief and say, look what we accomplished. We did this.
It actually came off very well, and again ahead of where people thought it might be.
Absolutely.
Cheaper than originally anticipated?
Oh, cheaper than speculated, because going into it, you know, all we had to work on initially were a lot of speculative costs. What are you going to get into? And I've heard this is going to cost this much and that much, and we just had to start taking little bites out of that elephant and putting some plans behind there and putting some real numbers. And I just can't say enough about all the teamwork that went on to get there, to have all the meetings. When you think about 9 city council, 7 county council, 3 county commissioners, myself, and just keeping each other up to date, keeping each other in the loop on that process. It was a great process.
How do you keep the community updated as to what the potential plans are, what the team is talking about?
Well, I think right now the updates at City Council have worked out really well. So we can keep some updates coming there, but as we make some concrete movement in how we can really start that process, that's going to have to be us coming back together and then deciding how we want to move forward and then taking those conversations out to the community. But I think the updates in City Council have been working rather well to kind of keep us informed as to how we're moving.
That same team a little bit, not quite with Reed, but with county government, is also now in the conversation stage about what happens with the former Elder Bierman building. Anything you can tell us about how those conversations are going and where that process sits?
Those have been great conversations. Commissioner Paust has done a great job of convening what he's called that task force to come together and circle around the table and talk about what we can do to secure the future of that building so that it doesn't just sit there or fall into hands that may not take care of it or may not develop it properly. And we want to make sure that we don't go down that same road again with a building that serves as a downtown anchor. And so those have been great conversations, and we'll keep those conversations going to make sure that we're doing all we can to properly mothball that building until the right developer comes along to utilize that in a positive and impactful way for downtown. That's what we want to see ultimately. We want to help guide it in that direction.
running a city, even this size, is a team effort, and we've mentioned team 3 or 4 times. Can you update us on what's happening with your team? There are a couple of what I think, and maybe I'm wrong, key positions that have kind of been open. IT department head, somebody to relieve Beth Fields, who is a controller, also been running infrastructure and development.
Correct.
Where do those 2 positions stand right now for you?
Yeah, those are in motion right now. So I've always been a very strong believer in don't do it fast for the sake of doing it fast, do it right. And over my time as mayor, we've had a few of those issues come up where somebody will say this isn't happening at quite the rate that I expected it to happen. But when we do make those decisions, we make them with, there's just a lot of thoughtful decision making that goes into those. So we've been working on that, and you should be hearing some announcements pretty soon on how we're going to move forward with both of those departments. But they're both being handled very well right now. Ronnie West is in the interim position of IT director, does an excellent job of keeping the department moving, and Beth serving as both controller and interim director of infrastructure and development. She has such a deep knowledge of that I&D department that she is able to keep that moving for us while we're in flux with that. So you'll see some announcements in the near future about how we're going to lock those down and settle them.
When you ran for office, seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
You know, that's interesting that you bring that up, because in some ways it does feel a long time ago, and in some ways it feels like yesterday. So on one hand, you go through so much in the office and so much changes and so much happens that it can feel like forever ago, but the busyness of the office makes the time go fast. And so in some ways it just feels like yesterday. So it's this very weird, it's this weird dynamic, but I'm sorry, but yeah, go ahead.
You're okay. Yesterday, you talked about a couple of strengths that really kind of set you off. One, your marketing background, and 2, your ability to communicate. I kind of like to go with those separately a little bit. I know you receive a lot of phone calls, text messages, emails, a whole lot more than I do, and I don't always get through mine. I'm sure you probably don't always get through all of yours. But I've been surprised by the amount of concern that I've heard from people about not hearing from you about some things as much as they thought.
Okay.
About a number of different things. One example, about a little over a year ago, August of 17, Rhodey came out to be, updating us on road conditions, things of that nature, traffic patterns, whatever the case might be. Haven't heard from Rhodey since last August. So Rhodey lasted about a year, even when there was still a certain amount of road construction, bike paths, things of that nature going in. Is there something that you could have done differently or would do differently to try to communicate better with the citizens of Richmond about various projects that were going on?
Sure. And I think that, you know, we did those updates at council on construction updates, and we did utilize paving the way in Rhodey. We went through a shifting of our talent deck there in that department. And so, as a matter of fact, just this week, we've made some strides in that department to start putting some of that back together and get those pieces back with Rhodey and paving the way, so that those updates are coming back digitally. So you should be seeing more of that in the near future. So in the communication realm, I think it's also important that when people will come and talk to me about, they'll say, well, I wish I'd heard about that. And I will often engage with them in a conversation and say, well, how do you prefer to get your information? Do you rely on the paper form of the newspaper, the digital form of the newspaper? Do you rely on social media? What do you rely on? And I get these very fragmented answers. And so a lot of residents have said, I just wish there was a portal where you could just text this stuff out. I said, well, that's a little unrealistic. So I have to choose media outlets in which to dispense information. But it's hard to capture people in those these days. They're kind of all over the place with how they're receiving information. And so we're trying to create a more robust platform in ways that we can put this out onto these different avenues. But it's going to continue to be a challenge as the digital platforms continue to grow in fraction. It's going to continue to be a challenge to capture them in the places where they receive their information. You yourself probably look to 5 or 6 different places for information. Yeah. And so it's hard to feed data down all those separate streams so that they're all collecting somewhere with people. So it'll continue to be a challenge, but we'll keep working on it.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Mayor Dave Snow. This is not a one-sided conversation. This is not about everything that I have on this pad. If you have a question that you would like to ask the mayor, we are taking your questions, 973-8587. You can send a comment on our Facebook page as well as at WCTV Info if there's a question that you want to send out through Twitter.
Now, you said communications and marketing. You didn't get into the marketing.
The marketing pieces,
okay.
I've got it.
Sorry.
I needed to remind people and talk to folks
ahead.
here.
Sorry.
Yep, go ahead. You want to change
Whose
these
interview is this?
The second part is about marketing.
Okay.
One of the things that I think people have felt for a long time is that, rightly or wrongly, the city was kind of languishing because they didn't have a direction. For a long time, we were the Rose City.
Oh, right,
and
right.
the changing business climate took us out of that. You talked, even again, yesterday, back when you were running, about trying to find an identity for the city, something that we can all hang our hats on, rally around. Are there any updates as to where we are in that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of work done on that front. I've talked about that in previous State of the City addresses. We have been engaging with a company who specializes in those branding elements, and just this week had another meeting with people who participated in the focus groups leading up to this. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into that, and I think we've made tremendous strides. We have some footage there from the meeting. That's awesome. So we've made some great strides in that process to get us to that finish line. When we unveiled on Tuesday with this focus group that we brought together on Tuesday, when we unveiled some of the tagline and the logo, there was some mixed response to it. Some people said it's not quite there. I think it's getting close. But you can see it right there. That was one of the logos. That was the logo that we put in front of the group that came from about a year's worth of work. And if we can hold that for a moment, I'll talk about it. You can see that we're working on a tagline that says Richmond Rising. And that is very, very important because we did online surveying and focus groups. When people responded to the surveys and the focus groups, there were a lot of things that were commonalities in their responses, which were very interesting and were eye-opening. So we said things like, "What do you love most about Richmond? What do you think Richmond needs? What could we benefit from the most?" Things like that, right? In those commonalities, when these people are taking these individual surveys, and we made cloud graphs out of their responses, they would say, "Richmond feels like home. This is home. I'm proud to call Richmond home, and I see things happening. I feel like we're moving, we're going somewhere." And those were really important pieces. One of the other really important ones that came out was people called Richmond authentic. And growing up here my entire life, I think that's something that I never realize and maybe take for granted. People that have been a lot of other places or lived elsewhere and then have moved here and then took that survey said, I've been to or lived in other communities that felt a little fabricated, felt like they were trying to create a culture. Richmond is real, it's authentic. The buildings really are that age. It's also real. And that was the one that struck the biggest chord. And so we thought, okay, the community, this is home. They're proud of their home. I'm proud to call Richmond home. And this is an authentic, real place with a really strong community feeling. That's another one that I hear a lot. People say, man, no community comes together like Richmond. Richmond knows how to come together. Talk about solidarity, right? And so from that came this forward momentum that we feel, the progress that we feel, the authenticity that we feel, and you got to keep taglines short. You can't make big, long sentences. And so Richmond Rising was really born from that. And that part of it, everybody was really excited about. The focus group said, absolutely. What do you think about Richmond Rising? Just as a tagline, not the logo part.
I'm still trying to get it to grow on me.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still trying to get it to grow.
So you're still thinking about it?
I'm still thinking about it.
I spent some time with it, and the more time I spent with it, I just loved how it felt, Richmond Rising. The logo, the R, can we go back to the R for 1 second? You can see there's a very purposeful arrow in there. So the stick from the H comes up and makes an arrow under the R. So it's very intentional in that the R is for Richmond, and we have an upward arrow. So This is really the first time the public at large is seeing all of this, and so now I'll probably get a lot more feedback than I anticipated, because I was only putting this in front of the focus group for them to kind of critique so we could massage it, change it, and bring it back to the focus group for final approval. But there it is, everybody. So I'll get emails tomorrow.
There you go.
Now. But that's okay. That's all right.
Input's
That's
good.
fine. It is good. Absolutely, it's good. And this is for all of us. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about Richmond rising. I feel it. I feel Richmond on the rise. I mean, I guess you say you're still waiting to see if it really resonates with you, but would you say that you feel Richmond is on the rise?
I do.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, obviously, I'm not from here. I've been here a long time, though. But I've seen the downturn. I've seen the change. I've heard from people what it was like years ago when there was much more of the manufacturing that people remember, the buses, you know, I mean, I remember driving up I-70 and seeing the sea of yellow and that whole thing. So things have changed, but I do think it's coming back. I do think some very good things have happened here.
I think so too.
And I think more can continue to happen.
And I think a key piece of that we can't overlook, and that is also a part of Richmond Rising, is, because I hear that a lot too, what Richmond was and became, but we have to believe that it can continue to rise. And if you say, I know what Richmond was, and I saw a population decline, and I saw some businesses scatter.
But this isn't the only place where that happened.
Absolutely,
Ask Detroit.
absolutely, and that's right. And instead of hoping it happens, it's believing it's going to happen and wanting to engage in it happening. And I feel like when I go out and talk to the community, I encounter a tremendous amount of optimism, positivity, and people saying, I see this. I see us rising. I see us changing. I see us growing. And I'm hearing that when I go around to other cities in Indiana. I can't tell you the number of cities I've gone to visit their city or visit their mayor, and they say, I just keep hearing all this buzz about Richmond. Richmond this, Richmond that. And that excites me tremendously. And so that makes me want to put Richmond Rising in front of them, and just that's our statement right back to them. You're absolutely right. There's a reason you're hearing a buzz about Richmond, because we're rising up. So I feel really good about it. And I'm really excited about finishing that process. I do want to talk about one other piece in that marketing element.
Go.
We have some videos that we worked with a company to create a series of promotional videos. And I know a lot of people have been saying, where are those videos? You brought that up in the summer. And so I want to talk about that for a moment.
Okay.
I held on to those. I was hoping that this focus group that we just brought together was going to love that logo and the Richmond Rising. We were going to put that on all the videos. Since we have more work to do, we're not going to do that. We'll wait. We'll finish up that logo and bring that back later. But I think it's time to show everybody the videos that were produced, because they're really awesome, great promotional videos, not only for us to see and be proud of our hometown, but when we have like the Home in Wayne campaign, where we're trying to advertise out there to people who may have moved away for greener pastures and say, greener is back home now. Come back home to Wayne County and look what we have to offer here in Richmond. So you'll see a lot more on that front in the very near future, because those videos are pretty much ready to go. They're in their final approval stage. Then we just got to take them and get them up on the website so everybody can see them, and then share them. Share them like crazy all over social media, so those cousins and brothers and sisters and friends that moved away, they see them and they go, look where Richmond is. And then guide them back to home in Wayne, you know.
Okay. You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Mayor Dave Snow. Mentioned that we are taking your questions, 973-8587, also on Facebook as well as Twitter at WCTV Info. And we do have a chat question, so let's go to that. Should I go to my next one? Okay, you were at one point pushing workforce development very early on, trying to skill up the workforce. When the Blue Buffalo announcement came about, you were very intentional about telling people that they needed to skill up. We worked with you on a short video where you were introducing adult education and NATCO Empowerment Center and some other things to people. You worked with Valerie Schaefer when the Hoosier Opportunity website came out. You were doing some Work Shirt Wednesdays, spotlighting businesses. What is City Hall now doing and continuing to do in the area of workforce development? Because that seems to be the key that a lot of people are talking about. Has that begun to drop off? Is that still a major push for you? And what specifically are you doing in that area? And how much can we or should we expect, now that you've been mayor for a while, we sometimes ask our elected officials to do more maybe than they really can do. What can or should we expect from City Hall, do you think, in that area of using that bully pulpit that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course that remains very important to me, workforce development. And there has been a lot. I mean, you kind of took all my answers in saying, making the video, working with the EDC on the Hoosier Opportunity website, investing in it. I don't want to imply that I helped build the website. I don't have that skill set. Work Shirt Wednesdays. Now, I will admit, Work Shirt Wednesdays have fallen off a bit. We just have to bring those back. That's just nothing more than scheduling issues. But I really, really enjoyed Work Shirt Wednesdays. And I think one of the key pieces there is workforce development is not something that, is just being championed out of City Hall. Governor Holcomb has been pushing Next Level Jobs with Ivy Tech, and that's a tremendous program. And so there are just, between the last time I checked that video that we made here with NATCO Empowerment Community Center, Richmond Adult Education, Manufacturing Matters, it was over 18,000 views. And so I felt like that was a very impactful video that really connected citizens to the resources that would help them navigate into gainful employment if they needed to skill up or climb up that ladder in the employment chain. And so at 18,000 views, I thought, man, we're making great strides. So maybe we need to repost that. I would definitely like to get back to Work Shirt Wednesdays, but I also can't say enough to promote the Next Level Jobs with Ivy Tech and the work that they're doing, because it's a tremendous asset. So there's lots of opportunities that continue to be available if you are unemployed or underemployed. Hoosier Opportunity is a tremendous asset, and all of those organizations that I mentioned that are working so hard. I try to attend every graduation for the Excel Center, and I've also tried to go to Richmond Adult Education, all of them as well, and tell those graduates how proud I am of them for choosing to continue their education the way that they are. And so I try to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So I go to the graduation and thank them, and if people have come to those graduations to see their friends graduate, they might say that they've heard me say the same thing. And I do say one thing that's very important that I say to all those. I am faced every day with people telling me the problems. And when I see those people who have chosen to continue their education, I am looking at solutions. Because that's what they really are. They are the people that have decided to make that time investment to create a solution. And I'm just so impressed by that every time. So at the next Excel Center graduation or Richmond Adult Education graduation, you'll likely find me there in some capacity, even if it's just to show support and just thank them for the time that they've spent in that. So continues to be very, very important to me.
You're watching In Focus on WGTV Channel 11. I'm going to talk to my director. Okay. We've got, we're actually going to do probably a couple of chat questions, I think, in a row. So if we can get the first one in for you. Regarding the partnership sharing, the partner sharing the cost in the demolition of the old Reed Hospital. Many of us are curious as to when Reed is going to, quote unquote, pony up their portion. I think you've been asked through a couple of council meetings whether we have received the money from Reed or not. I didn't hear the question last time. I didn't hear the answer last time. So have we received some of that funding from Reed?
I'd have to go back and check on that myself. We have an agreement in place, and so I know that they are committed to the agreement that was in place for their $1 million contribution. We had some milestones to hit in that agreement that I know we've kept up on our end for, so I have no doubt that we'll see that all the way through. I'd have to actually check and see where we were in that right now, because we're paying that out as the bills come due. Okay. And so it's just, it's not as though you put it all up and write one check back out. It's as due and as the work comes in, and we're just now hitting that mark of substantial completion, so then we'll have more invoices coming in to be paid back out. So I can certainly deliver that at the next council meeting and let everybody know where we are with that.
Okay. I think not only, we have a phone call, so hopefully we check this out so we can hear. Okay. Caller, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. We're a little low in here. If we can get a little bit more volume on that, that would be great. What's your question for the mayor?
My question is this. I am a property owner. I have some rental properties, and I take a lot of pride in making sure that my tenants pay their utilities on time. And the only one I can actually monitor is the sanitation bill, because they hold property owners responsible for that. And my concern is I've spoken several times, more than I could count, with people at the sanitary district on relations to the bills and allowing people to go that far in arrears without actually shutting them down or turning in a disconnect for the water. Does the mayor seem to think there's any issues around the policies that the sanitary board, the way they deal with this at this time, or what's his feelings on the way things are going with the sanitary district at this time?
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that question. So I heard a couple of things happening in there, and just this week we were in a meeting in my office with our city attorney, our sanitation director, to have discussions about that lien process and what that looks like. And when we have tenants that come in that don't pay their bills and the property owner being responsible for that bill. Mm-hmm. So one of the issues at hand, and he had referenced, our caller had referenced the bill that racks up. We have a system in place where we reissue those notices. And so what can happen is if that notice isn't caught initially, the bill can rack up subsequently. And so we've talked about that and how to remedy that situation. So we're working through that right now. He had mentioned the water shutoff, but that's a separate entity because that goes to Indiana American Water. And so that was one of the other pieces of the conversation that we had was how can we open up a better dialogue with Indiana American Water to coordinate these services and the turning on or shutting off of the services so that we don't see this very inconvenient overlap that I think he is talking about. So that's a conversation we continue to have. We are diligent about operating under the code which lays out how we do this. And so we're continuing to review that, continuing to try to make it even better. And so those conversations will continue, and we'll continue to try to improve that as necessary. But I know that it's something that's very important to all of us, and just talked about it again this week, and those conversations are continuing.
He mentioned the sanitary district in his call. One of the things people ask me sometimes, how do you get all these questions? I listen in on people's conversations, and I'm able to bring some things. There was a real concern in the community about how leaf pickup went this year. It seemed to be slow. People weren't sure whether there was mechanical breakdowns with sanitary district equipment, whether there just weren't enough people to do the job. Even after we kind of had that ice thing come through and a lot of branches came down, cleanup of that still seemed to be kind of slow. What are you hearing about the sanitary district, and is everything there okay? Do we have all the trucks? Do we have all the equipment? Do we have all the people that we need to get the services that people are expecting in a timely manner?
Yeah, and this year the leaves fell really late and all at once. We had a wind event that came in, if you recall. It got really, really windy for a few days. We had a really, really late leaf drop brought on by some wind. And then we had a little dusting of snow and a little freezing right over top of it. So in the sanitation department, because they'll pick up in the sanitary district area outside the incorporated area for the leaves, and then you have the street department picking up inside the incorporated area.
Right.
In the sanitation department, we're going through some major vehicle overhauls, but we have vehicles that are operating right now. They're aged, but they're operating, and we're replacing some of those. But I can tell you firsthand that our crews work very hard. I check in with them. I stay in close contact with them. I was in very close contact several times a week with our sanitation director about let's make sure we're getting all this cleaned up, and they were out there diligently working. So they'll always stay on top of that. They'll always get the job done. They make multiple passes, and so I know that they're out there and working hard. And sometimes Mother Nature has her own way of laying things out for us and makes things tricky, but we'll still get it done.
Okay. We've got another chat question, one that came in a little bit earlier this week, so I want to try to get in as
This one
many
came
other
earlier
questions.
this week.
This one came in earlier this week.
This person was geared up. They were ready.
Oh yeah, they're psyched
Early
for you.
planner. All right.
Okay. Among other things, were the 4 pillars of your administration's objectives when you started, when you were first running. Everybody keeps going back to yesterday.
Yeah.
There was the snow crew. Community building, economic revitalization, educational involvement, workforce development. Workforce development we kind of talked about a little bit. How are those pillars going?
You know, it's really funny that someone sent this in because just, my goodness, it was probably just the other day, maybe it was Sunday. I was going through some of that stuff and looking at it, and I pulled out an old a mailer from the first campaign, and I was just kind of reviewing all of that, and I felt really good about the work that had been done on each of those. And now that person that sent that chat in E was actually two things. It was not only educational involvement, but it was also environmental sustainability. It was a twofold E. And so in that community piece and that revitalization and the workforce development, I think we've done a great job at that. I think there's still work to be done. Obviously, there's always going to be more work to be done. But when you talk about community, and I've made many grants available to strengthen and empower our neighborhoods, and those are going very well. We're seeing more neighborhoods coming together that are very excited. Last summer, as a matter of fact, I was invited to a neighborhood meeting where 3 different neighborhood groups had come together in one. It's one of the coolest things to walk in and see. Yeah, it was really, really awesome. And so I know the neighborhoods are feeling really empowered, and they are coming together. And the revitalization pieces, of course, we've made strides in that, and we'll continue to push for that. In the education involvement, environmental sustainability, we can go on in that as well. I've done what I can in the educational pieces of, in both educating the public on, we talked about the video that I made for the workforce development resources, and in environmental sustainability. That's always been a key element to me. From the campaign, it became a real linchpin of the campaign when I didn't even necessarily mean for it to be, it just did. And then in workforce development, we talked about that as well. So I'm still really happy with the work that we've been able to accomplish in 3 years. It's been a busy 3 years, but I feel like we've checked a lot of things off the list, but still more work to do.
Okay. Another question that we have for you. See, I may not get to all my questions.
I know.
We were promised further planning updates on the Depot District bike paths. How soon will we receive these?
Yeah, we just submitted the authorization to proceed with Clark Dietz on that. And so the bike plans are still planned for 2022 unless those get pushed back. And sometimes that does happen. So I look for that to happen maybe 2022, could happen in 23. And so we just have the authorization to proceed. So now Clark Dietz will start putting together those planning meetings. I've talked to council members about being a part of that as an advisory group and involving representatives from the Downtown Business Group and the Depot Business Group. And they'll serve together as an advisory committee as we bring the public together and engage with Clark Dietz. And so we still have a long road ahead on that. You know, part of the big part of that conversation when we were talking about those bicycle and pedestrian lanes was that the planning had not happened yet. And if you recall, that kind of kept coming back up again and again and again. Planning still has not happened. We have a long planning process ahead of us, but plenty of time to get it done. Because again, we're looking out at 2022 for these. So Clark Dietz will be the lead on that planning process, and we'll bring these people together and make that advisory group and get that started. It's really exciting.
There was a social media post this week, and I don't believe everything I see on social media by any stretch of the imagination.
That's good.
But
That's
it
good.
seemed like there was some damage maybe done in trying to do some plowing or something to some of the concrete or one of the flower beds around the bike path. They're about 5th and Main, real close to the main office. Has there been an investment made in whatever we need to clean those bike paths up, because it's not as wide, obviously, as a street lane.
Yeah.
Runners, walkers, bikers, even after it has snowed, want to be out on those. Is there a particular piece of equipment that's needed, something of a special size? Has that been purchased?
Yes.
Have we made the investments?
Yeah. It's just an attachment that goes on the front of a vehicle that can fit on the path there. We do have that piece of equipment, and they're using that to keep this snow cleared up as we go through this coming snowstorm right here. So it'll be out there. It'll be out there this weekend.
Okay. A kind of follow up to that same general thing. Nope, never mind. To that one. Yeah, the flower beds that are there. Is that going to be a park department? They're going to fill the flower beds? Who handles that? These things have flower beds in them.
Yes.
Are you planting shrubs in those? Are you planting flowers in those? What's that going to look like?
Part of that design that was approved back in 2015 included the flowers that go into the bump outs, as they're called. And so the company, Rundell, Ernstberger and Associates, that's part of their contract to fill those bump outs with the necessary plants that they'd agreed to plant. And the contract with them is not complete until those plants take hold. And then to answer the other part of your question, will the Parks Department and the floral crew be who keeps that up in the long run? Yes. So they'll kind of keep that maintained and keep that looking nice. And may in the long run find that switching out some of those plants will be more beneficial. So we'll just kind of have to see how that comes in. I think it's going to look very, very nice though when those plants come in. We have some pops of color, you know, and some nice foliage through there. So I think it'll look really nice. And then the Parks Department will maintain that.
Talk a little bit about the layout of those bike paths that have been put in so far. It almost seems like it's making something come true. One of the things that people used to say is, there's no parking downtown. And I used to go, there's plenty of parking downtown. I could go down to 10th and Main and park on either side of that street and walk to where I want to go. It's small blocks. Now, because the bike path has taken up so much of that, you don't have that parking there. So now people can really kind of look and go, see, there really isn't much parking downtown. What is your administration's thought about replacing some of those spaces that were lost? Do you feel it's needed? Where can they go? What's that going to look like? Because the size of these, the way they are designed, are taking away some parking. So how do we handle that?
Yeah, and they don't completely remove parking because you
can park in between.
You can, yes. And so there wasn't quite the loss of parking that I think was perceived through the process. So we've had some conversations about what parking looks like as we continue in the future planning of this, and we'll keep having those conversations. But I think it showcases the importance because we were never going to see the massive big box America parking suddenly planted in the middle of downtown. And so adding a layer of connectivity to make it more convenient to park once and navigate through the heart of the city is really what was always important from the start. And it's why those plans started way back in 2011, 2012 to make sure that some piece of connectivity was being added, because all downtowns suffer from the parking syndrome. You go to any downtown across America and you want to go to that wonderful little local shop, and it probably has, if it's lucky, 2 or 3 parking spots in front of it, and then parking sort of just around. And that's what downtowns are like, and so that was always going to be an issue. And so creating connectivity to make it easier to park once and then navigate to that place you want to go. And so we'll keep having discussions about that. It's not, there's a lot of room in this entire process for emergent decision making as we learn to grow and live with these new elements that we have. But I think that they'll, in the long run, much like Elstro Plaza, it reminds me of so much of when Elstro Plaza was announced. And just the sheer negativity. Why this park? The things that I heard about Elstro, about how terrible it was going to be, the disaster it was going to be, the trouble it was going to be, how filthy it was going to look, how much of it was going to be more of a liability than an asset. But look at Elstro now. It's beautiful, and it's such an asset to our community. It's where our farmers market thrives. We go enjoy music. We enjoy Shakespeare in the park. It's a really key piece of our city now. I love that park. The Wednesday Food Trucks Day, that's a great one as well. And so I think it's like that. When it's hard to envision how we're going to live with it, then there's that pushback of, well, then maybe it's bad. But once it's there, and once you can embrace it and live with it, you say, oh, I get it. This makes sense, and this is an important part of our city. So I think we'll get there in the long run, but it's just going to take some time to finish it all up and get it all in motion, much like Elstro Plaza.
Since we're talking about the downtown area, I'm going to kind of change my direction here a little bit. There was, and it was going on last time you were here, conversation about not-for-profit organizations in the downtown area. The loss of the TIF revenue for part of that area, if enough of them were to move in. There are places that started as a business, kind of seems to have shifted. What is the conversation like as far as an overlay zone, zoning? Is the administration thinking about making any changes that will help protect the TIF money that comes out of that area? And that's not picking on any one or other not-for-profit, because you made it perfectly clear that there were some down there that were going in that you were excited about. But what does that look like as that downtown changes?
Well, I think that's a continuing discussion that we're going to have to keep having as this grows and changes. I mean, it's like you said when we saw Viches choose to leave downtown, we saw a church go into its place. We belong to the Indiana Conference of Mayors, and so I went and consulted with a lot of other mayors and said, who's been through this? And what did you do to navigate through this? And some of the other cities that have been through this said, one of the best things you can do is develop a relationship with that organization so that you have a dialogue that's open. And so that's exactly what I did. And so I've opened up a dialogue with the church that's coming into downtown so that we can become partners. And I think that they're going to be great stewards of downtown. And so we always have to be protective of our downtown and the heart of our city and foster it in the right direction. And so those conversations are going to continue. And we'll continue to have difficult discussions about what's right here and what's wrong there. And we're just going to have to keep the dialogue open and keep the conversation going. And we have just started our master plan process. Just Wednesday night, we started down the comprehensive development plan. The last comp plan process was back in 2006. It's time to restart that again. And I think through that process, which is going to involve a lot of community engagement and a lot of community discussion and input, that's a good opportunity for us to engage with the community and hear from them and hear how the community would like to see downtown grow and change in the coming years. Because I think that's going to be an important part of the discussion as well.
I've had people go through those processes, and one of the things that they always lament is that as much as sometimes during the off years, there's a lot of conversation, when you start a master planning process, it's hard to get people to come in and talk. How do you plan on engaging more conversation in the community so that there is more buy-in to this master plan and there is not so much misinformation spread?
Two key ways. So first of all, I've assembled a really robust and diverse committee that is brought together based on their ability to really go out and touch the community and listen and engage. That's really important. So we've got about a 17-member steering committee that will be able to really go out and engage with the citizens and say, tell us what you want to see from Richmond in the next 10 years. That's really, really important. And I'm part of that steering committee, so I don't want to lead that group. I want it to be citizen-driven. So we have two co-chairs, Joe Green and Kathy Lucid, and I've laid upon them the expectation that this is a citizen-driven, real people-driven comprehensive plan. So then that next step is you put that committee together and you put that expectation on them, and we're going to go through this process. We've contracted with American Structure Point to do a lot of the heavy lifting, if you will, to help facilitate the meetings and do a lot of the data collection. But then how do you get the community excited about it? Right. So for me personally, you brought up early on in our conversation the marketing background. It's really hard to get someone excited about something called a comprehensive development plan. That's a very bureaucratic word. There's no emotion in that word. And so going back to that branding element, Richmond Rising, I think this is a perfect opportunity to take that branding element and attach it to what is otherwise our comprehensive development plan and use that as the vehicle to not only put that in front of the community, but to call it Richmond Rising. And so instead of trying to put out this invitation and say, come join us at this 6 o'clock meeting tonight for the comprehensive development plan where you'll get to put stickers on maps. We say, come join us for Richmond Rising. This is our city growing and rising, and we want you to be a part of that and help us shape that. And it's just more engaging, it's more emotional. And I think that'll bring people there because once they get there, I think, and they get to engage in that conversation, they'll really enjoy that process. I remember as a citizen coming into some of the meetings for the former comprehensive plan. And I really just felt empowered and connected when I got to play my role and voice my opinion on how I wanted to see Richmond grow and change. And so I really want people to want to do that in this plan. So look for your invitation to be a part of Richmond Rising.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're spending some time with Richmond Mayor Dave Snow. Your questions are being accepted at WCTV Info, which is our Twitter feed. We're also live on Facebook, and you can send a question there. Or, like an earlier caller, 973-8587 if you have a question for the mayor. We had another chat question come in that want to get to. Want to see if we can get that one up. Is that ready? Yes. I'm talking to myself, obviously. What is the update on the $800,000 given toward code enforcement and blighted properties? Our neighborhoods and streets, particularly around your office, have never looked this bad. Will the new Bureau be empowered to find the city abusers?
Well, so there's empowerment now. So let's hit there. I see 2 question marks there. So we got to hit this in 2 parts.
Okay. And we'll keep that one up for a little bit.
Okay,
in case
good.
you need to
good.
refer back.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So in the what is called the Code Enforcement Department, that is a new department that we created through our budget process to really deal with the blighted properties, the unkept lawns, the trash and debris. Because right now, this is a really good opportunity to do some of that unpacking we talked about early on in the conversation.
Cool.
Right now, or up until the beginning of this year, the way that this has worked is if I'm driving down the street and I see that someone has dumped a pile of trash on a sidewalk, I pick up the phone and I call that in immediately. And I say, let's get sanitation over here and do a special pickup. We have to get an inspector over here to document this. We got to turn all that into legal. And now I got 3 departments that I'm touching that are all working on this independently. And it slows the process in trying to keep all those in line and keep them aligned and keep that process moving. The other issue is the code, the city code that enforces all of this, it's not very heavy-handed. It's not a deterrent, if you will, to not
As it
do
exists now.
As it exists now. So when we really took a hard look at this and said, what would expedite this process to really help us clean things up, is to create a code enforcement department to change the actual city code to read that the person in charge of issuing the fines, issuing the violations, and being in charge of this would be the code enforcement officer. So we decided to create a new department called the Code Enforcement Department, that a new department head that will be the code enforcement officer, and he or she will then be the person that runs the department, that gets this cleaned up, documents the amount of time it took, the equipment that it took, the manpower that it took, gets the photographs necessary to get it into legal, to button all this up, to take it in and issue whatever fines or violations necessary to make sure that it now becomes a major deterrent. And I don't ever like to be in a position to be the big, mean city government. It's just not a place that any mayor ever wants to be in. Mm-hmm. But if you remember back to my very first state of the city, I said we have habitual offenders that are dumping trash and seem unaffected by the penalties that are in place for that. And I kind of put that on call and said that the time is running out to kind of turn this around. I brought it up again in the second State of the City address and said more work has been done. I'm trying to put this out there to stop dumping the trash, stop letting the properties fall apart, stop letting the lawns, overgrow. Mm-hmm. And I will say that some of it has turned around. We have seen some improvement in some places, but not enough. And so we are in a position now where we've budgeted for and created the Code Enforcement Department. We have opened up the window of application for the Chief Enforcement Officer. We just, as a matter of fact, yesterday completed the pre-screening of the applicants that submitted for that. So we are now shifting to the final interview phase for the Chief Enforcement Officer. And once we hire that person, that will then initiate our new Code Enforcement Department and get that department going. And so what you'll see are inspectors within that department and a work crew. And we're going to share an administrative position with our Infrastructure and Development Department to save a little bit of money on that. And then we're working to codify and update the code that supports that department. Our legal department's been working very hard on that. So you will see stronger code coming out of this, heavier fines. Because in my opinion, picking a number and saying, if you dump trash out in the alley or out on your sidewalk, it's an X dollar fine. Just to pick a number, let's say it's a $100 fine. It's not the greatest way to address the issue. Let's address it based on, there's a standard amount, so we know that this dollar is the fine amount, plus what it took us to clean this mess up because you saw fit to just dump the trash out on the sidewalk of the alley. If we have to bring a vehicle for this and put 2 people on it, that grows that fine exponentially. And so you're going to see all that coming quickly because we're just about to move into the final interview phase, get the person hired that we choose from the candidate pool, assemble the inspectors and the work crew, and off we go with the new code enforcement department. So it's going to be a pretty heavy shift. But I'm very excited about it because I know it's going to have a very positive effect for our city and the trash and debris and the alleys that aren't being trimmed back and all of this. The thing I would say is I'm trying to be a little bit careful in the design and the implementation of this because I want this department and this chief enforcement officer to, I think the way that they're going to start is being a little more reactive to the messes and the issues, but I want them to be able to shift to a proactive community partner. So I don't want them to be right out of the gate someone that just, oh, I don't want to deal with the code enforcement officer, or I hate that person. I want them to be seen as a community partner in this in the long run. But I think that they are at a disadvantage because I think initially it's going to be a bit reactive until we can make people understand that we're really, really serious about getting this cleaned up. I'm not going to launch something in front of this community and say Richmond Rising. There's all this buzz about Richmond all over the state. Things are changing and growing, and we are a rising community. But then we have all this trash and debris and dilapidated properties that just aren't being given attention. And so we have to implement something from our side to show that we're very serious about Richmond Rising, and we're going to clean this up. So,
I think most of what you just talked about is kind of on the outside. There are landlords, not all, not even the majority, that are putting people in substandard housing, barely livable. What has your administration been able to do, and what are you planning on doing about having dialogue and fixing that situation for our residents?
Yeah, now that's a big discussion that we have yet to have, and that discussion is coming. And that has to be a discussion with the administration and with council and with the citizens. A piece of the code enforcement office will be residential, but we have to put the code behind that, and we have to be careful about that because I've received feedback from both sides of this discussion. I have heard from a lot of citizens that talk about the substandard living conditions who are they're very defeated. They feel very defeated in that they don't find that right avenue and that right advocate to say, help me in these substandard conditions. But I've also heard from a lot of very responsible landlords who say, be careful, because we have a lot of responsible landlords in this community as well that do a very good job keeping up their properties and taking care of their tenants. And so we don't want to react in a way that will hurt the business environment of our local responsible landlords, but we do want to operate in a way that gives pause to those who may not want to do it in the best way, and gives some protection to those tenants so that they have that ability to lean on the city as their advocate to help them through this process. So we'll have those discussions, and we'll get there, and those discussions are coming.
Some of those probably would have gone to a Human Rights Commission, which doesn't exist, which is something that, again, you talked about working on. Where is the work on that at this point?
Yeah, that's been difficult. I did talk a lot in the initial campaign about the rebranding and rebuilding in the Human Rights Commission. Right. So, to be really honest, the difficult discussion that I have to have with the community, is that in the time that I've been in office, there have been just too many mitigating circumstances to navigate to get to that yet, but I think that work is still yet to be done. It is still very important to me to rebrand and rebuild that, but the things that I needed to get done in the office to bring some stability in some areas and some departments and just to get some other things done. I have so many hours in the day, and we have finances that we have to allocate and work with, and so it remains a priority. And that's tough for me because I'm an overachiever at heart and I want to do the things that I say I'm going to do. And so to know that I said, 3 years ago, this is something I'm going to do, and I sit here now, and we're not there yet. But I know that it remains a priority, it remains something important, but we've got to make milestones out of this. We can't flood the system with everything at once and hope that this sticks and that sticks and that sticks. We got to do this in a way that we're creating a concrete foundation and things that are sustainable as they move on. That's been very important to me, and it's been important to me in the Human Rights Commission. I've had some people ask, why has no one been just appointed to the commission, even if it's not funded? I feel as though it's a disservice to those appointees to appoint them, but did not hand them the funding or the tools to accomplish the tasks at hand. And so I feel like I'd almost be setting them up to fail if we can't do a little more to substantiate the work that they need to do. So there's just still more work there that needs to be done.
You've made a couple of trips to Japan in your 3 years. Can you talk about how the city, how residents should look at those trips, and some people would say the return on investment on those trips? How do you look at that? What creates, in your mind, success from those ventures?
Those trips are vital. They are very important, not only culturally, but for our local economy and securing our place in the global economy. So in the first trip, those were really introductory meetings for me to introduce myself as mayor back in 2016. The follow-up meeting was really, really important this past November, in November of 18, because it showed our willingness to return. It showed that what we said in 2016, when we said the relationship was important, that we meant that we're willing to return and continue that relationship. When we go to Japan, you would be amazed at how well they remember all of the previous mayors from Richmond that have been there, and how fondly they speak of those mayors, and how Richmond has over many years made an investment to foster our relationship with our Japanese investors. So they'll talk about Mayor Andrews being in Japan and Mayor Hutton being in Japan, and they go on and on. They have very fond memories of our past mayors, and they're so appreciative that they took the time to travel there. So in our first trip to Japan, we came back and we saw some growth in two of our local Japanese-owned companies. We saw growth in TBK and Suncall, and investment. And so in this meeting, we hope to see some of the same investment after this. I know that in one of the meetings I was in, one of the CEOs of one of our Japanese-owned companies talked about coming to Richmond this spring and showing off some of the new technology they're working on within their company. Another piece to that trip, though, it was not just all business meetings. There was a piece of that at the beginning where we visited our sister city, which was very important. We have a sister city in Unan, which is in the Shimane prefecture, and oh my goodness, the reception and it was so important to them that we would make the time on our way into Tokyo to make our business meetings, that we would stop in Unan and visit our sister city. It was tremendous, the reception that we were given. It was just so warm, and they were so thankful and so appreciative. And they told us in the meetings that we had when I met with the mayor of Unan and city officials, they said, thank you for coming and visiting, because they send students here on a regular basis. We have not been as successful at sending students to Unan from Richmond, and we need to work harder on that. That's really important. We've got to get some more community buy-in to get the funding together to get more students from Richmond to Unan, because just culturally it's so important to have that experience. So they said, you've shown that your relationship with us means more than something on paper, and that's very important. And so we want to open the doors for economic partnerships from Unan to Richmond. And we had a lot of conversations there about that. It's starting very small. There was a winery just outside of our sister city, which is a beautiful place and so much like Richmond. And we talked about, can we sell the wine in Richmond? And can we bring some Richmond wine here and have like sister city wines available? We met some local craftsmen who made some cool little wooden plates and bowls. And we said, we have places in Richmond that could sell this. And we have great craftsmen in Richmond that can send things here. So we can start in little small steps and start trading wares and goods and showing that we're committed. So it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. It's a busy trip. Not a lot of time for sightseeing and getting around, and you get up early, you go meeting, you go till evening, you try to eat, then you got to try to go to sleep because you got to get up early and do it again, and it's busy. And it's about 24 hours from the time you leave here with your suitcase in hand and drive to the airport get on the airplane, and the whole rigmarole to when you walk in your hotel in Tokyo, it's 22 to 24 hours. And then that tiredness you feel when you finally get there never leaves you, Eric. it never leaves you. Because then you get there after 22 to 24 hours of travel, and you never really catch up. Because then from the minute your feet hit the ground in Japan, it's go, go, go. You've got this meeting and this meeting and this meeting and this meeting, and you're going to work over lunch, and you got dinner's another meeting, and it's just, and then you sleep the whole way home. It's just exhausting, but it's worth it.
Cool. You were taking some classes, I think. One of the things that I think you were trying to get done was to get more versed in economic development. And I think you were taking some classes, some seminars at Ball State or something along those lines.
Correct.
How is that process going, and what have you been able to learn that you think has helped you over the last couple of years?
That was a course I attended through Ball State that was an economic development course that mayors are encouraged to attend, and other city officials, and also up-and-coming economic development directors from around the state. And I learned a tremendous amount through that because my goal has always been to be a partner to our EDC, not to duplicate anything that they're doing, and certainly not to hinder anything that they're doing, but to be able to be a strong partner. And it's through that learning that makes me a little more versed in what we're doing when we go to Japan. So those two things actually really go hand in hand, because that trip, Valerie Schaefer from our EDC makes that trip to Japan as well. And so it's, I believe, really helpful for her to take the mayor into that environment of which she's very well versed when we're meeting with CEOs of corporations that have their headquarters in Japan and then offices all over the world, and including Richmond. And for me to step kind of, as mayor, I'm representing Richmond, and I can't even say, it's hard to articulate how humbling that is. I'm halfway around the world representing my hometown, and it's a tremendous feeling. But I have to kind of keep one foot in being the mayor and being the representative of my hometown, but also understanding their needs, their wants and needs as a company that needs to grow and foster and do business. And so having that coursework helps me have a better understanding of that, so that I can help her do her job and help these businesses to grow. And so far it's worked really well. Like I said, Suncall and TBK have both seen some internal investment and some growth.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Mayor Dave Snow. Appreciate the time you're giving us this evening. We've been at this for a little over an hour, about an hour and 10.
No kidding.
We've got about 20 minutes left to go.
I am shocked at how fast this goes when we do
You say
this.
that every time.
I know, but it goes so quick. It goes so quick.
Good. I'm glad you think that.
Yeah.
You'll come back and do it again
Yeah.
at some point. I think we've got another chat question. And obviously, I've been asking a lot of questions. I want to make sure that we get your questions in. So we've got another chat question for the mayor. First one is, if you choose to run again, and if reelected, what will you do to promote a younger group of leaders into department head positions in the city? You were, in your last State of the City, you started out by touting some of the young people that
Absolutely.
had helped through Earlham do some various projects and things. What do you think about
Well,
trying
I
to
feel
promote
like we
more
have
young
some.
people?
I mean, I guess it depends on everybody's definition of younger, but I feel like we have some younger people in positions right now. I think we're pretty diverse in the age range that we span in department heads. But I hope, if I've done my job well, and I appreciate that question. The person that typed that said, if you run again and are reelected, that aside, I just hope that in the time that I've been in this office, I've done something to foster young leadership. That's been really, really important to me. I hope that I've led myself in a way and conducted myself in a way that young people see the office of mayor as attainable and a positive position of change and community leadership and community partnership, and it's something that they want to do. If all of us as community leaders aren't acting in a way that is encouraging young people to want our jobs and want to do what we do, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. And so I hope that, re-election and future aside, that I've already done that, and I've already opened those doors for young people to say, that's what I want to do. And I know that I can do it. I've really tried hard to spread that message more than anything. When I go out to schools, for example, love going out to schools and talking to kids in classrooms. I know it's cliche because people say this a lot. They always say that, oh, the kids are so bright, they're so great. But I'm telling you, we have some of the brightest kids in the world in Richmond. When I go out to these schools and talk to kids, they are so challenging in what they come up with. They're amazing. I will always start the conversation the same way every single time. I say, who in this room can be mayor someday? Raise your hand. I started the exact same way every time. And every time, 4 or 5 hands go up. And sometimes I'll see students point to other students. And I go, no, 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 no. Every single hand go in the air. Everybody raise your hand with me. Because every single person in this room can be mayor if that's what you want to do to help our city. You might choose a different path. But if mayor's what you want, then mayor's what you can be. And it's really important to me that they hear that directly from me. So that any of them sitting in those seats thinks for a moment, I can't be mayor, because that's a big position. And I'm fill in the blank. My family's not rich. I'm this or I'm that. No, that's not true. You can be mayor. If that's what you choose and you want to be, and you want to come out here in front of this community and tell them how you'll lead the city, then the community will choose you as a mayor. And so I hope that I've done that. I hope that I've fostered young leadership already. If I haven't, I'll feel terrible about my time in office, but I hope I've already done that.
We've got one more chat question the voice in my head is telling me. So I try not to listen to those all the time, but what do we have? During the past 3 years, what has been the top 2 or 3 accomplishments you would like to be remembered for during your time? Oh, we're writing you off already. During the past 3 years, what have been the top 2 or 3 accomplishments you'd like to be remembered for during your time in office?
Okay. My first answer to that, because there are some things this is going to sound really weird when I say this. The things that I want to accomplish the most are things that if I do them right, I won't be remembered for. Does that make any sense at all? I know that's weird.
Is it the pain meds kicking in?
No. What I mean by that is, if you think about going to Glen Miller Park, I love Glen Miller Park so much, and you think about Roosevelt Hill, and you gather there for the city fireworks, and you gather there for festivals. Mm-hmm. Who originally had the idea to carve that into that hill and put that amphitheater up and make that a gathering place? I don't really know, but someone did. Mm-hmm. And now it's an organic part of our city that's important to our culture and our community. So my name doesn't ever need to be on any of it. I don't care. But if I did my job right, I've left behind things like that the city embraces and is a part of our culture and is a part of our community, and they don't really know where it came from. They just kind of feel like it's always been there. And that's okay. So in that respect, that's an important part of my job. My name doesn't need to be on it. But I hope if people do remember Dave Snow at all in the long run, they just say he stayed positive and he encouraged positivity, and he told everybody, keep believing in Richmond, keep fighting for Richmond, and don't let the negative people get you down. Keep believing in our city. So those are the important things to me.
Before we wrap this up, there was a regional stellar proposal. Mm-hmm. That was not accepted, but it would have done something with the Nicholson School site. Mm-hmm. There has been talk for a number of years that there needs to be some city resources put into helping the North End grow. Mm-hmm. Where are you in that process? I know there were some things laid out and beginning to be worked on under Mayor Hutton. How is that process going? What are the plans on that end of town to make sure that those residents are feeling maybe what some others are feeling, that Richmond is rising?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes, and so those plans have been in place, as you said, for a long time, and were submitted into the regional stellar application process for us to be designated a regional stellar or stellar region. And that application was not accepted, and that's perfectly okay on 2 fronts. First of all, those plans will stay in place. We'll continue having discussions about that. We'll continue trying to put all the pieces together to make some movement on that site. But second, let's not forget Richmond wasn't accepted the first time we applied to be a stellar city. If there's a key word that I would put onto Richmond, if I had to just list out some keywords, one is resilience. This is a very resilient city. you can tell us, we can put that application in and you can say no, but that doesn't mean Richmond stops. we regroup, we regather, we reset, we come back stronger. It's just what we do. It's just how we are as a community. So that's not by any means the end of a road. It's just a piece of the journey. And so the Eastern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Transformation Committee there that worked on that, they were going to be a part of some exit interviews with the state offices that organized that regional stellar designation and hear some of the critiquing. And then from that, come back together as a group and say, what do we do with this now? Do we take the path that we took in the original city stellar designation, and do we get right back up and do this again? Now that we kind of went through this process, we have this critiquing, do we feel like we have the tools and the ability to navigate this on our own, or how do we want to do this? And so those conversations are taking place right now. And so I know that we'll choose the right path, and we'll continue to be resilient. But that was a great process. I don't want anyone to think for a second that not being designated a stellar region throws any amount of water on that fire. What we saw were all of these counties coming together and working together and getting to know each other's plans and how we're all working as a region to really just build this whole part of Indiana up together. And Mayor Pavey from Rushville, who was a big part of the regional stellar application, that we've made 2 trips to Japan together. A matter of fact, when we came back from Japan, Mayor Pavey came to our council meeting to join me in giving a report about our trip, and then I went to Mayor Pavey's council meeting. And so that's not something you see everywhere. That's a really true regional approach to how we're viewing our workforce development, our communities, and what we can all do together as a whole to bring this whole area up. And so I was so impressed with how everyone worked together on that. So we'll keep that discussion going. It's just a piece of the journey. It's not by any means an end.
We're down to about 10 minutes. I mentioned stellar. I'm going to go back to that because we're still working through the last stellar piece. One of the pieces was the facade project, which seems to be something that is just dragging on, it seems. Where is that? I know that Tin Lizzie has started theirs. I thought a second one was supposed to have been started by now, but we're not quite there. When will that get done? When will we see the face of those buildings change downtown? Where are we in the timeline on that right now?
Yeah, they are navigating through that right now. I'm not going to speculate on the date right now and give you the date, because then if we go a day past that, I did the wrong thing. And so I'm not going to start throwing dates out there. But I know that they're working through that now. I know that they had another meeting this morning and that they're working through that process. And so there are so many intricacies to that process that once they start getting into them, it's one thing and another. But we'll get through that. We'll get through that process and get that done, because that's an exciting piece to our stellar designation and wrapping all that up. So we're working our way through that. And downtown and Depot District and the whole heart of the city right there are just so important to our community as a whole. That's where we really tell our story of who we are as Richmond. And so we'll keep fostering that and keep pushing that forward and get it done.
The elephant in the room, and it's come up, one of the last questions, if Jack Cruz, your former department head for infrastructure and development, has already announced that he is going to run for mayor of the city of Richmond on the Democrat ticket. Is he running unopposed, or are you throwing your name in the hat? Are you running?
Well, that's a great question, and that's a question that I have to have with the community. That'll be a question that I need to answer in a conversation that I will have with the community on this isn't quite the place. I love being here and I love the show, but that's a conversation for me to have with the community. But here's what I will say. I have absolutely loved every minute of this opportunity to be mayor of Richmond. I mean, I absolutely loved every minute of it, and I continue to love it every day. Does it come with stress? Is it difficult? Absolutely, but it's worth it. It's worth every minute of it. And so I'm excited to, in the near future, have that very conversation with this community, and we together decide what my position looks like moving forward in Richmond's very bright future. Because no matter what, I'm always going to play a role in Richmond's future. I'm committed to that. I've been committed to that for many years before I was mayor, and I'll be committed to that many years after I'm mayor. So we'll have that conversation. We'll have that conversation very soon.
We only get to have that conversation if we're voting or not voting, right?
Well, I mean the conversation that I'll have with them about how I'm playing a role and what role I'm playing. So we'll do that. We'll get there. Very soon. Very soon.
Okay, fine. I'll leave it. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Which you probably weren't expecting, but starting next week, Tuesday, as a matter of fact, there's a series of events that are taking place all around the Meltdown, which I know is a festival that you have had a lot of fun with through the years. So I'm going to give you a chance to talk to the community and just talk to them about that festival, why it excites you, why they should get involved, what you're looking forward to,
my goodness,
besides the hat and the ear flaps.
Yeah, the Meltdown has really become our city's signature event, hasn't it? I mean, it's grown leaps and bounds.
It has.
I'll tell you one of my favorite parts of Meltdown, which might surprise you. I make it a point to get around to like the shops like Roscoe's and things kind of around Elstro where everybody's gathering and listen, because I hear all these conversations from people who aren't from here, and I can't get enough of it. So I'll sit there and try to kind of be quiet and kind of try to stay out of sight with my little cup of coffee, and I'm hearing, oh, now is this a coffee shop? You know, oh, this is really nice. Where's the food? And I get to hear people talk about the city when it's somebody visiting talking to someone else who's been here before, but neither of them is a local. And I get to hear that conversation, and it's the most eye-opening, ear-opening experience for me, because I'm seeing the city through eyes that I've lived here my whole life. I don't see it through those eyes, and so I love that part of it. We'll have the ice carvers coming in again from all over the country. It's very exciting, bringing their chainsaws and their blocks of ice. An interesting little piece to that, and I don't know that I can pull this off. And if he's watching right now, he's gonna be angry with me. But our sanitation director happens to be a very talented chainsaw carver, but he carves wood. And so I've asked him if we were able to procure you a block of ice. I don't know that we can. We put it out in front of City Hall. Can we get a department head carving a block of ice with a chainsaw during Meltdown? Can that happen? I don't know the answer to that, Eric, but if he's watching right now, he's screaming at the TV, why, Mayor, no. So if we can make that happen, though, wouldn't it be really cool? Just to add that into one of the carvings, a department head carving a block of ice. So then we'll have the ice fights and all that fun stuff that goes along with it, and I'm super excited. It is so much fun. I'm not a fan of cold weather, Eric, but Meltdown comes around. I'm like a big kid out there. So I can't get enough of it. I love it. So I'm really excited.
Okay.
Now, the other important thing next week, I don't know if this is going to be included in your announcements.
I have no idea, but go for it, just in case I miss it.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over Monday being Martin Luther King Day, and just encouraging citizens to be a part of those events. I know Meltdown's coming, and that's exciting, but don't miss the opportunity to be a part of all the community events surrounding Dr. King, and really encouraging people to take up service events on that day or those surrounding days to really honor the life of Dr. King. So I don't want to pass that opportunity up to talk about that as well, because that's important. And we have the Mlk Breakfast. It's at Lingle Auditorium, 7 a.m. It's a wonderful event that's put on every year, and I've always enjoyed attending that event. We always have a great speaker. I think there's another great speaker lined up for this year. So do something with your day to honor the life of Dr. King. Something positive.
There's speakers there. Earlham is bringing a speaker in, so there's a lot of things to see and hear, and a lot of discussion that can go on that day and probably needs to go on that day for people. Mayor Snow, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank
I mean,
you.
to carve out 90 minutes on an evening when you could be home on a treadmill doing something other than doing this.
You know me well when you mentioned the treadmill. You know me well. That's,
I know. People appreciate the chance to be able to hear from you, to ask you questions in this setting. So seriously, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No problem. We couldn't quite get him to answer the question as to whether he's running or not. We'll take bets on it afterwards, but do want to remind you that whatever names appear on the ballot, and people are beginning to decide whether they are running for mayor, for city council, for clerk, those folks are going to be asking for your vote. So make sure that you are registered to vote. 2019 primary election season is upon us. Voter registration is going on through April 8th. Voter registration office is at 301 East Main Street, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. To check your registration, you can do that from the comfort of your home. You can just go online, indianavoters.com, and be able to do that. If you're one of those people that still has a Christmas tree, mine's not in my house, but it's still in my backyard. Is the sanitary district picking up Christmas trees or
You can
not?
call for a special pickup of that tree. Yes, you can.
You can call for a special pickup of your Christmas tree from the Richmond Sanitary District. There you go. I wasn't sure about that. I hadn't seen that in writing this year.
But using Cope is so great because they recycle those and put those on their trails. And so I would encourage you to utilize Cope or Hayes Arboretum, either one, for your Christmas tree. There it is.
Are you reading my
Oh,
notes?
my goodness. I'm preempting slides now. Oh, my
Look
goodness.
at him. It's almost like you've done something like this before.
Right?
You've had a chance this evening to hear from the mayor. Coming up this Friday morning, you'll have a chance to hear from your legislators, as Indiana University East has the first of what will be 3 legislative forums. It's a question and answer with State Senator Jeff Rotz and Representatives Tom Saunders and Brad Barrett. That's from 8 to 9 a.m. in the lobby of Whitewater Hall. The moderator will be Minji Parker, Associate Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Again, that's from 8 to 9 this Friday, the 25th, not tomorrow, but Friday, the 25th. The first e-waste recycling of the year is coming back, and if you've got old computers, monitors, things of that nature, and we have a room full of that stuff that we have to get rid of, free recycling for broken or old electronics. Paper shredding is not available. Older TVs and CRTs are not accepted, but this is going to be going on the IU East campus, Whitewater Hall, from 9 until 12, so definitely help start doing some cleaning out. We're going to run through a series of slides here. We talked a little bit about Meltdown, but some of these will give you some specific ideas of things that are going on if you're not sure when they're happening. Obviously, it's going on from the 22nd through the 27th. You can meet an ice carver Tuesday, January 22nd from 3:30 to 4:30 at Morrison Reeves Library. Another popular event, Chili for Charity. Celebrity Cook-Off is the 24th from 5:30 until 7. Fire Up for the Richmond Meltdown, the 24th at 7 p.m. Jack Elstro Plaza. Hopefully we don't get rain this year.
I
hopefully it just
hope.
stays really cold. Family
Yeah.
Fun Zone is going to be open the 25th through the 27th. Ice carvers are going to create some really nice interactive ice pieces. The Big Reveal on the 25th at 7:30. The Frozen Fairy Trail, Saturday the 26th at 10. The Mega Throwdown, the 26th, 7 to 9:30. All of that and more. And just keep watching your Facebook page or whatever. It'll be on social media. If you've got some things at your home, some electronics in your home that you think might be really causing your electric bill a problem, here's something interesting. Centerville Public Library actually has an energy monitor that you can check out for 3 weeks from the library. So that's a really good idea to find out whether you've got that. If you missed any part of this show and want to see it again, it'll air beginning at 10:30 tonight. We'll also air it tomorrow, twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. Audio of this program can also be heard on G1013 and ESPN Radio. And next week's program, we're talking about election a little bit. Deborah Berry, Wayne County Clerk, will be our guest. Sherry Harlan, the outreach coordinator for Richmond Health, will also be with us. Join us next Thursday night for another edition of In Focus. Have a good weekend.